found little methodological research supporting it, and no scientific basis that found that it worked or achieved its purposes. It's actually been analyzed by numerous counseling groups, and I have a series of quotes I can give you from various professional groups, professional medical groups that have looked at this. The American Academy of Child Adolescent Psychiatry has found that these efforts may encourage family rejection, undermine self-esteem, connectedness, caring, important protective factors against suicidal ideation and attempts. It says there's no evidence that shows that it's supported. American Academy of Pediatrics said therapy directed at specifically changing sexual orientation is contraindicated since it can provoke guilt and anxiety while having little or no potential for achieving its changes in orientation. The American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy said they do not consider homosexuality a disorder that requires treatment. As such, they see no basis for reparative therapy. The American College of Physicians, that says they specifically oppose the use of conversion reorientation reparative therapy for treatment of LGBT persons. The American Counseling Association strongly suggests ethical professional counselors do not refer clients to someone who engages in conversion therapy. The American Medical Association, AMA, opposes the use of reparative or conversion therapy that's based on the assumption homosexuality per se is a mental disorder. The American Psychiatric Association says that psychotherapeutic modalities to convert or repair homosexuality are based on developmental theories whose scientific validity is questionable, and notes that anecdotal reports of cures are not valid, and talks about the risks associated with it. The American Psychoanalytical Association said the same thing. They adopted a position statement. The American School Counselor Association has adopted a statement proposing it. So has the American School Health Association, the National Association of Social Workers, Pan American Health Association, I believe the World Health Organization as well. All these organizations have specifically adopted position statements saying this doesn't work and it's bad. We would note that actual existing research has shown that children whose sexuality is not accepted by their parents are 8 times more likely to commit suicide, 6 times more likely to report depression, 3 times more likely to use illegal drugs, and 3 times more likely to be at high risk for HIV. So basically, all the scientific research shows that the medical community has completely rejected this, and that using it actually harms children. That's the reality. The bill only relates to children. It just specifically says that this type of research cannot be, or this type of therapy cannot be used on kids. And the reason that's important is because kids don't have a choice. Kids they don't have a choice as to whether or not they want to engage in this therapy. It's really up to their parents. Parents are the ones that make medical decisions for them until they're 18. After they're 18, they make their own decisions. But until they're 18, their parents can. And I think it's important that in this situation that we make a statement, make it clear that this cannot be practiced as to children, and that the government is not going to pay for it. I would note that bans like this have been passed in 4 states. They're pending in about 15. They've been upheld by legal challenges. There's been federal legal challenges to this kind of therapy on I think, First Amendment grounds. The courts have rejected that. And I would also note that last year, a civil jury in one state issued a civil verdict for consumer fraud against an organization which was practicing this, awarded damages against a child who this practice was given to. So it's outdated science, it's old-fashioned. I think we should ban it. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Senator Surovell. Tom, do we have other substantially similar bills? Senator Dance has a bill that's similar along with Senator McKeachin. Have you reviewed them for analogousness?
Sure, Senator, thank you. Senator Dance and Senator McKeachin's SB 267, it doesn't have the second enactment clause, which prohibits state funds being expended for the purposes of conducting conversion therapy. But other than that.
All right, we're going to go ahead and I may regret this later, hear them separately, because I think that's a substantial difference. And Senator Dance, you said you don't want to roll your bill, and Senator Surovell at this time, is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Donovan.
I just have a question. Is there any evidence the state is paying for these services at this time? Is it a covered service?
When I've spoken to, I think it's DMAS who came to see me about this, and they indicated that they don't have any way to determine whether or not they're paying for it, because when the services are billed to them, it's just billed for counseling, but not the specific type of counseling due to healthcare privacy issues, and so they're not able to determine whether or not a specific counseling bill is for this or not. However, if this were on the books, and somebody were to bill the state for it, they could be sued for Medicaid fraud, or they could be, they come after for Medicaid fraud for seeking reimbursement for services for which the state has prohibited. Being provided.
So that's a good question, but what I wanna do, is hear from other interested parties first, and then we'll open it up to the subcommittee. Just in the interest of moving this, cause I got some questions as well. Are there any folks here, to speak in support of the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
members of the committee, I'm Scott Price. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance for Progressive Virginia, and we had asked Senator Surovell to carry this bill. We support this bill, and we're here to answer questions. The senator did a very good job of explaining the bill.
Thank you. I'm not, next in support of the bill.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Charlie Schmidt. I'm with the ACLU. For the reasons the Senator has expressed already, we support this bill.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Josh Sanders. I'm a survivor of conversion therapy, and I'm here to provide any testimony that's needed. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Josh. Anybody?
Chairman, members of the committee, Jamie Parrish with Prohibiting, Virginia, as Senator Surovell presented an exhaustive list of leading medical and psychiatric associations that have come to the conclusion that conversion therapy is bad, harmful. It's not only harmful, as he indicated, children who undergo this therapy attempt suicide, and children who undergo this therapy kill themselves. It's been found to be fraudulent in some states, and we think this practice needs to end here in Virginia.
Thank you. Ma'am? I'm sorry, sir, we'll get you next.
Jennifer Basin, representing the Virginia Association of Community Services Boards, and we are in support of this legislation. We do believe that it will reduce trauma that's associated with this kind of therapy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Where are you from?
The Virginia Association.
I know that. Where are you from?
Richmond.
Okay. Sir?
David Brown, the Department of Health Professions and the Administration supports this bill.
Thank you. Anyone else in support of the bill? Pardon me for a moment. What fun it is. Anyone here to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Chris Penn of the Family Foundation, listening to the testimony by Senator Surovell, a lot of leaps within the conclusions that were made, and if you read some of the details of some of the medical associations, there's a lot of leaps in there, but we'll leave it at that. The primary reason we're opposed to this bill, a couple of reasons. One of them, it clearly violates the Code of Virginia. Section 1-240-1 says parents have the fundamental right to make decisions concerning the upbringing and care of their children. This law is in direct conflict with that fundamental right of the parents making decisions. Secondly, there are kids who have unwanted same-sex attraction. You are essentially saying to kids who want counseling, you're not allowed. You can't have it. And I think that is a violation of their right to be able to get the counseling that they would like. And I've asked John Linder to come, who counsels and has also been counseled, to tell his story and talk to you a little bit about it.
Chris, aren't there lots of other types of counseling that we don't let kids get?
For example?
I don't know, I'm asking.
I don't think we have any prohibition on any specific type of counseling.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in support of the, or in opposition to the bill?
My name is John Linder, and I wanted to share my experience. I sought counseling for unwanted same-sex attraction in my early 20s and graduated from college. I've been in these meetings before, and I've heard really abusive horror stories, but mine was nothing like that. It was just like any other counseling we've experienced. We worked through childhood traumas, mother-father issues, gender insecurities. What I found was that it was a long process, but for me, it helped me resolve the conflict that I was feeling between my sexual attractions and my faith, and I actually found it to be liberating. It wasn't like I was trying to change from something I wasn't to something I was, something I wasn't. For me, it was the opposite of that. It was just having a space where I could explore safely who I really was, and for me, counseling was like, if a tree fell on you and then people just slice off theories of it was not coercive. The sponsor of this bill said that children don't have a choice. Well, if this bill passes, that will be true. If you are a teenager with unwanted same-sex attractions, your only option will be gay affirmative therapy. And I believe that's a violation of your fundamental rights.
I'm sorry, John.
Yeah.
Your only option will be what?
Gay affirmative therapy, so there's two therapeutic options.
Sure, I got it.
Right? Gay affirmative therapy says you're gay, there's nothing you can do about it, and you might as well embrace it, and if you find a conflict with your faith, you should change your faith. That's not really a choice for Virginia. You can't make that for me. To me, that's outrageous in America. That would be something we consider. And let me just say one other thing. Well, let me just leave it at that. And
John, I'm breaking my own rule here.
sure.
I'm breaking my own rule here as committee chair of working through this testimony. But while I got you here,
Yeah.
there would be an argument made that you're kind of the unicorn. There's one John Linder.
Yeah, I think that's a valid argument.
And, well, my question to you is, do you know anyone else who's had this
Sure, I
experience?
did, and thank you for asking that question. So, it was so transformative in my own life that after I got married, literally when I got back from my honeymoon, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I decided I want to do something with my life that matters. I want to make a difference in people's lives, and so I began volunteering with an organization in Richmond that helps people resolve, conflict in sexuality and identity. And I have done that. I've done that for 10 years, and I'm not elected. Like counseling, I've met hundreds of people. Their stories are as varied as the stories of people in this room. There are people who said, "I loved it. It changed my life." People said, "I don't think it does anything," but it's their choice.
Okay, so the answer would be yes. You have met some
Absolutely,
other
I would say hundreds. I mean, maybe thousands, but hundreds. It's been 10 years, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to cut you off.
Yeah, but
Anybody else speaking in opposition to the bill?
Eddie Ayler, Virginia Assembly Independent Baptist, and again, I see this definitely as a religious liberty intrusion. And I also have pastors within our organization, within our group, who are licensed counselors. And they said they have been challenged now as to whether they're going to be able to continue to be a licensed counselor as something like this comes in. Because that will definitely restrain them from being able to counsel in this way. And I just think that this is a huge intrusion in a way. And again, children belong to parents. Parents know what's best for their children. Allow them that opportunity to use this if they wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Anyone else to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Jeff Caruso with the Virginia Catholic Conference. These are certainly complex issues, but we share the thoughts expressed by others that have opposed the bill in saying that these are really matters that are best explored by families and consulting with their physicians and their medical counselors. And so for those reasons, we do oppose the bill.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else that I missed? Was anyone neutral on the bill that feels like speaking? I think if I could talk better, I might be able to run a better subcommittee. I'd like to come back to the patron, if I might, briefly, and if any other members of the subcommittee have questions or comments. I'm curious, you said 4 states have adopted this. Which 4 states those might be?
California, New Jersey, Oregon, and DC.
So 3 states, or California, New Jersey, Oregon.
Okay, 3 states and a protectorate, or whatever DC is.
Okay. And then, to the patron again, you are an outstanding attorney, and I don't say that to blow proverbial smoke. I'm just curious how we reconcile this from a free speech, a First Amendment perspective, because I sort of sarcastically asked the gentleman from the Family Foundation if you can name any other therapies or treatments that did have, because conversion therapy and reparative therapy do have some supporters that we banned as a Commonwealth. And to me, probably not the attorney that you are, it strikes me that we're essentially outlawing particular types and categories of speech, and furthermore criminalizing insofar as you indicated that you might be charged with Medicaid fraud if you were to perform these therapies. And that, to me, seems, number one, draconian, number two, very, very frightening as it relates to America moving forward. You may not say these things to these people, right? I mean, in the ACLU's incredible defense of the Ku Klux Klan in the Skokie, Illinois decision, the point was, just because speech is horrible and reprehensible and should never be made, doesn't mean that we should outlaw it. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, I have a couple things to say to you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, you need to remember the scope of the bill. The bill does not seek to limit anything that a pastor has to say, or anything that somebody employed by the church who's not a licensed medical professional has to say. The bill only relates to the licensed medical professionals in Virginia. So it is limited in that way. So I don't see a First Amendment religion issue with it, because it doesn't go to that.
And certainly would if you're a licensed medical professional, wouldn't it? Go ahead, Senator Carrico.
What about the pastors that are licensed?
If you want to obtain a license in this Commonwealth to engage in the practice of whatever that medical profession is, then there are all kinds of requirements that kick in once you get a license. And you can lose your license if you engage in what's deemed to be unethical or inappropriate medical behavior. There's all kinds of, I'm sure the doctor who's in the room can explain to us all different reasons why doctors can lose their licenses for saying things that don't have any medical basis or constitute bad medicine. And as I pointed out, every single professional medical association that's looked at this has said it doesn't work and it's bad. Now, with respect to your free speech issue, in terms of whether this is a free speech issue, the government creates consequences for all kinds of speech, and the U.S. Supreme Court has made it clear that if the government finds a specific type of speech to be harmful, that the government is okay in regulating it. That's why we have laws against defamation. That's why doctors can be sued for medical malpractice. That's why lawyers can be sued for giving bad advice. It's not a free speech issue to give somebody bad legal advice or bad medical advice. That's why you can't scream fire in a crowded movie theater. There are certain kinds of speech you can't threaten somebody with physical harm without committing a Class 1 misdemeanor most of the time. I would note, with respect to the right of parents, which I heard a minute ago, there's all kinds of behaviors which we tell parents they're not allowed to do. For example, we tell parents they can't beat their children. We tell them that's illegal. We tell them they can't poison their children. We also passed a law, I think, I just remember 4 years ago, we passed House Bill 964, Delegate Bell's bill, which prohibited anybody from showing a child a grooming video, which is a video depicting sex acts to set up a child for sexual abuse. There are all kinds of things that we prohibit parents from doing that are currently in the code, and this would simply limit licensed medical professionals from giving advice, engaging in practices which have been deemed by all the medical groups that looked at it to be ineffective.
I'm gonna refrain from further questioning, but I do want to speak to the bill. If anybody else has questions, you're welcome to ask them. It strikes me that when we're comparing a therapy for which there are proponents, for which the science is not settled, contrary to the dogmatic claim that it is, to beating or poisoning a child, that it's a reach. And I will stand by my suggestion. The reason that the Constitution allows speech to be limited is the imminence of potential harm to another. Now, I respect you in that your argument would be, this is imminently harmful to another. I disagree, primarily because of testimony like that of Mr. Linter and other things I've read. I am not ready as an individual senator to walk Virginia out on that limb with Oregon, New Jersey, California, and DC. And I really do believe that there are professional counselors who believe that this is worthwhile therapy and that this would be essentially crossing a Rubicon we've never crossed. There may be debate, right, whether this works or not, but there are advocates who can articulate strongly that it does, whether we agree or not, and for the government then to shut off that speech, to me, this isn't about conversion therapy. It's not. It's about a right of a parent to do what they think is best for their child. And the Constitution of the United States. So when we take these steps, right, fire in a crowded theater means you might trample me on the way to the door and I might die. That Jeffersonian concept of liberty is broached when you step on my head and I die, but I think we're not there yet. I can't put conversion therapy in the same basket as beating and poisoning. So I'll have a motion at the time, but I want to let anybody else in the committee that wants to speak to it.
I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Donovan, I'm sorry, Senator Carrick, go ahead, Senator Donovan.
I just wanted to comment that unfortunately there are many therapeutic modalities within medicine that are very controversial and subject to debate about their effectiveness. I do think that it's best that those therapies and their utilization be sorted out in the professional arena and not legislated. Because if we start cherry picking what we're going to say you can and can't do, we're really going to intrude on the ability of science to determine what is in the best interest of our patients. And so I think there's a lot of data out here to present to parents and to individuals to look at whether or not they should engage in this therapy. But I think it's best left to the professions and not legislated by the legislature. So I would speak against it on that premise.
Senator Carrick, go.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to the full committee that we pass by and accept this bill.
I'll second it. Shall we do a voice vote? Do I anticipate calling the roll, perhaps? All in favor of PPI, Senate Bill 2, recommending to PPI, because we're the Senate, not the House. Senate Bill 262.
You're not going to listen to the others who've been through conversion therapy. You're going to vote right now and just call it a day.
I asked multiple times if anyone else would like to speak.
Oh, I would love to speak.
Get up and speak.
Let's do it. I thought it was for the senator or the committee members.
And all these other people.
Oh.
You need to stand and speak, please, sir.
Okay. Unfortunately, you're ignoring the science. And the APA said homosexuality is not a disease in 1973. The APA, the American Psychological Association, will take away a doctor's license if they're caught doing conversion therapy. They're coming to legislators because it's not helping. We have suicides every week of children. Friends of mine committing suicide. I was in conversion therapy for 5 years. I was in a camp in Charlottesville, Virginia. Not everyone walked out alive. They committed suicide because they knew they could not change. And there's a social aspect they cannot get over. This is my mother and my sister. Part of my therapy was I could not speak to them for 3 years. They said to heal my homosexuality, I was not able to learn effeminate behaviors, and to learn how to be a man, I had to stay with boys only, and I was separated them for 3 years, and I was told that it was going to save my life. The AMA has discredited this many, many times, and you're a doctor. You know. You're ignoring the science. It's so great that this man has found success in something. Good for him. He might have been bisexual, he might have been something else. We can examine it, I'm not sure. But it doesn't take away the fact that every week someone is committing suicide, or drug overdosing, or taking their life because they know they can't succeed. And you're ignoring the science. You're ignoring the Surgeon General.
So, thank you. So, I appreciate your perspective. I guess we can either ignore the science in your words or ignore him. I'll say this, there's been a motion as it relates to what science.
May I say something?
Sure.
As a mom,
what
I went through with my son, first of all, the law is for 18 and under. It's a form of child abuse because I lived a living hell with my son because I was ignorant, and I had a professional man tell me that my son is going to be straight in 6 weeks, and it didn't happen. And because of my ignorance, and I didn't realize what was going down, and my son was in such a miserable state. Before we went for therapy, he was a happy-go-lucky kid, and this therapist said, is going to make him straight. That didn't happen. And we suffered from him emotionally. And it's really, to me, it's a form of child abuse. It took him 5 years with me getting educated and having good people around me to help him to accept himself, because it's more important that he does accept himself for who he really is. I, as a parent, it's bad enough that I took him to a therapist to change him, because I thought that was the right thing to do. I also, it's like saying I, as a parent, doesn't accept my son for who he is. So to me, that's not fair, and that is it's almost like saying fire in the theater, because I'm hurting my child, and I'm here to speak to help other children not suffer this. If you want to be 18 and older, and you want to go, and you're old enough to make that decision and go for therapy, fine, but not under. You don't take children and abuse them under the age of 18.
How old was your son when you sent him?
16.
And he was there for 5 years?
Yes, he decided to continue because he wasn't happy. He didn't accept himself. He wasn't.
It was a 5-year period.
But he didn't.
And the doctor promised
he
he'd be
was
straight in 6
hearing
weeks.
about what the therapist thought of him.
Right. All right, well, again, I thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the bill?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I just wanted to, Matthew's sister, I just wanted to add that we're not against getting support for children, for minors. It's just that this is a therapy that has an agenda, and that's a very complicated relationship between a therapist and a minor. Why is there some sort of, stated outcome that is dictated by a parent? Like we had no idea, we didn't know anything about conversion therapy. My older sister came across this therapy when my brother at 16 said, I think I might be gay. And he was dealing with, he said, I'm not sure I want this. And he was raised in a house where, that we loved him, and we said, you can do whatever you want. But when we came across this therapy, we thought, oh, they're saying that there's possibility that you weren't born this way, it could be something else. And we very ignorantly were like, let's give this a shot. And there was, Matt can talk to the kind of things that went through in that therapy, but the fact that it wasn't therapy about, we're here for you, and those 5 years, it was about, there's an agenda for you, versus we're here to support you and make you feel loved and accepted no matter what. And that's what we take issue with. For a minor specifically, like you're saying, we're not saying your pastor can't talk to you about this, but in the confines of being a medical professional, you have, and giving this advice and saying this is the treatment that we're going to provide you, so you can become something that you are possibly not, or whatever it is. There's just way too much focus on an agenda. So I just wanted to speak to that.
Thank you for your very articulate and well thought out comments.